So, Pete Ouko, karibu sana to Fixing the Nation.
Asante sana Latif and Janet and Bishar. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Karibu, we're going to delve into this conversation and why you are so invested in it yourself and your own personal story. But before we do that, unajua Jano wa Makots.
Jano wa millimeter.
Tena nilisema millimeter. I'm like, where is that? Make it make sense. I can
We
see
can
that.
invent a new unit
I
of
can see
measurement.
that one will not leave me, but it is
It'll
well.
stay with you.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so Jano wa Makots gives us the quotable quotes every morning. And today she has a new one. She's going to give us the hint and the quote.
yeah, the hint and the quote. The hint is a woman who was a civil rights activist. She was a poet. She was an author. She was a huge inspiration in the African American community many, many years ago. I'll say the quote and we'll see whether you know it from some of her work. She said, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise." Who said that?
How does it escape me?
Pete can see.
It's something you've heard. I know.
No, it's somewhere. I think
She's
it's
right
the
there.
they have taken in the
You
morning.
can do the uptake.
The pep.
Why don't we see if we have time for him
She's
to
right
answer
there.
it before he leaves?
Right? I
Yeah.
think that's a good idea.
We can come
So
back
as
to
you're
that.
deliberating
Yeah.
on the questions we're asking,
Still
before
I
you go,
rise
you'll be
because
like,
that's what Lewis Hamilton uses a lot.
yeah, he uses it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go. I think a lot of people have taken it on. So we'll ask you that.
But still,
But
like
still-
dust.
But still I rise.
Like dust, I rise. Fantastic. And Pete, you rose. I like that always kind of segue from the quote. But share that exact moment you realized you were wrongfully incarcerated and how that experience kind of shaped your view of the justice system.
You know, it's not about the moment I realized I was wrongfully incarcerated. It's the moment I was wrongfully arrested. Because my late wife, Jenny, was killed outside Buruburu police station. So I went to Buruburu to be told under what circumstances someone lost her life in a well-guarded, or just outside a well-guarded place. And that's where the drama started. And that was in 1998. Never left that police station. Ended up on death row. And, you know, the first thing for me was, I'm 28. I've lost a 24-year-old wife. I have 2 young kids. So my thought immediately was not even about why I'm being arrested. It was about where are my kids going to? What am I going to deal with? I'm a widow at 28. So that's what hit me. So it's like I went into a flux, and even when I was being told by my in-laws that, you know, we're putting you in by the cops, we're putting you in, I was like, why? But it still didn't hit me. It still didn't hit me, and it took me a very long time to get the why. And that's what drove my passion to justice, because many people don't have the time to ask the same question, why? Many people don't have the same opportunity to confront the system legally and fight for it and just ensure that no one goes through what I went through. So the wrongful arrest led to the wrongful conviction. The crazy thing, I can't talk much about the details because I'm in court. Even though I came home, I took the matter to court for my total exoneration. I was pardoned by President Kenyatta in 2016, October, on his birthday, so I always remember that. But then, before that, I'd already taken this matter to court. So it's lying somewhere. It's been lying in the court for 7 years. The former Chief Justice Maraga gave me a 5-judge bench to hear it. Apparently, the file disappeared. Those are the injustices I talk about. The file can't be traced, yet it was there. When I filed the matter, everything was there. And if I trace back my fight to, you know, I mean, the injustice I went through, it was just a speck of it. But I can tell you that, or I can tell the nation this, that how did I get to where I am in the courts? It actually came from here, this nation center.
Okay.
It's a long story. It will come out long, big time. But I didn't even know about it. So there's this journalist who did my story when I graduated. And I think she was very inquisitive. And she asked me, like, Pete, you keep telling us you're innocent. And everyone who's in prison says that. So why should I trust you? So I told her, you don't have to trust me. You don't have to do this story. That was during my graduation. And
Graduation?
yeah, I'll come to that.
Okay.
He's going there, then he'll come.
Exactly. And so she was doing that story, and I remember she came, and I don't know what research she did, but she ended up at the courts and wanted to see my case file. Then the person on the other side was saying, why do you want Pete's case file? And Pete is at home. She's like, no, I'm from the Nation Media Group, and I'm writing this story about this guy, and he's in prison. So the to and fro led to one thing, because the guy on the other side of the counter was looking at the official court records, which showed that I've been freed,
Right.
that my appeal had been allowed. But on the other hand, she was struggling with the fact that I was in prison. So she came back to committee and told me, Pete, now I trust what you told me. I think it's after that that she ran the story on my graduation. And so when she told me what she had seen, I had to find ways of getting that. So that's what I took to court. Because now I have records from the court, from the judiciary, showing that my appeal was allowed. I have lots of shenanigans that happened in this court. So that's what drives my passion to justice. It's not only Pete who goes through that. Had it not been for that young journalist who was here, I could have just been a statistic.
I want to ask the question, though. 1998, your wife dies, and you go to ask a question. You end up in the police cells. You end up in court. You end up going through the entire system. This is a murder case, and murder was a capital offense. And in those days, before the new constitution, it was not bailable. So first of all, you have
Zero bail.
kaa ndani
Kabisa.
mpaka tumalize kesi yako.
True.
And then the case goes through up to a point where you are convicted and sentenced. Were you sentenced to life in prison, or were you sentenced to death?
Now, that's the second. Thanks for that, Latif. True, back then there was no bail. So you go to prison and you're locked in 23 and a half hours a day. You only have 30 minutes to be out. Either to bathe or to take a shower or to wash your clothes, then you go back. So for death row inmates, capital remand inmates, you are locked in 23 and a half hours a day. And then that means from Friday to Sunday, unless you're going to church, which is also within the building, you're still locked in. So maybe when I came out, I was not this dark, in Ishida, Nairobi to Kidogo. But I was light because of being locked in for a long time, for the first 10 years, sorry. But then there was no bail. We had to be in there. You had to build the resilience, trust in your faith, and move along on that. And then when I went to court, we don't have a jury system in Kenya. We had the assessors in Kenya. So the assessors were acting like the jury. And the assessors all gave their unanimous verdict of not guilty. So I said, these are the Kenyans who are judging me. If the Kenyans have said, I'm not guilty, and I know I'm not guilty, I'm not going to walk with any shame. So the moment they pronounced themselves, and then the drama started, because after the assessors gave their verdict of not guilty, the unanimous verdict, all of them, I was taken back to prison. I was told to come back for my judgment in 2 weeks. I came back in 2 weeks. It was not read. I was told to go back again. I went back. It was to and fro before it was finally read. So when the judge pronounced himself that I'd been sentenced to death, the only sentence for the Kenyan system is death by hanging. But of course, you have an appeal process, and you have an appeal process ongoing, and you hope to fight it at the appeal stage.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I never lost hope. I never lost faith that I would be home.
There's something there. This assessor system, we'll get into that because I saw a play last year that was based on something that happened post-independence in Kenya. Exact same thing as Pete. Assessors all said not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Judge issued a verdict of guilty. I think we need to go back to that and figure out what is the system. Is it legally binding? How much weight does it hold into a ruling? But did you have legal representation from the very beginning of your case?
I had the best legal representation.
The best.
I'll tell you, I have no doubt about what my advocates did at the High Court and even at the Superior Court. They did the best. I would never hold anything against them.
Right.
Yeah.
So from the very beginning, you had legal representation.
Okay, that's lucky me. I was able to get. In fact, I remember when I got arrested, I had 3 lawyers coming to court. And because they'd known me, they'd known Jenny, and they just came to the police station, actually, that they were going to represent me. No payment, no nothing. And they were good lawyers. They were top lawyers. And 2 of them are since deceased. But then one came and continued with the matter. And yeah, I had a very good legal team, both at the High Court and the...
Right.
And just to answer what you've said, the jury system, the assessor system in Kenya was not binding. They give their decision, their ruling, but the judge can go against it. The only thing is that he needs to give a reason as to why he differs with what they've said, especially if it's unanimous.
Okay.
But he has the final say. On the other hand, the jury system in Europe and America, they're the ones who make the decision. So the moment they pronounce themselves, the judge just carries that along.
Right. The reason I wanted to draw that thread, because if you had the very best legal representation, you still ended up wrongfully convicted. There's not much hope for so many other people who are in our justice system, either without legal representation or without good legal representation. And the fact that they could still be found guilty of crimes they didn't commit or without due process is so scary. But I want to go back to now the passion point, because you managed to get out at some point. You said you were pardoned by President Kenyatta. Was that a pardon because there was new evidence, or was that, what was the basis of the pardon?
So the new evidence, the new and compelling evidence, thanks to the Constitution and thanks to CJ Mutunga, the former CJ, because he's the one who told us the only way you can fight an unjust system is to use the legal way.
Right.
So we really championed for changes in the justice system. We gave our memoranda for the new Constitution when we were in prison. And we would continue pushing. And even the Muratetu case that now outlawed the mandatory nature of the death penalty, that was pushed by inmates. And also by the judiciary telling us, you guys, we can't make a decision, but if you bring it to us, then we'll make a decision based on the facts that you brought on the matter. Okay. So there are very many people going through the justice system who don't have the same opportunity. What have we done about that? I mean, when I came out, and I think I'll talk about that later, now we train paralegals in prison. Because some, they might not have, especially people charged with robbery violence. Right now, as I'm speaking today, there are 158 death row inmates today. And 3 of them are women, 155 are men. But you'll find that majority of them are guys actually charged with the offense of robbery violence, in which case mugging. Not even the hardcore bank robbery and stuff, no. Those ones, either cops deal with them in their own way, or they disappear, or they do whatever they do. But the majority, the 95% of people on death row for robbery violence are actually the muggers. We upgraded mugging from a misdemeanor to a robbery violence charge. So I'll give you an example. Right now we are with you, and Eric is walking with his mug. That mug he has there, just the 2 of us.
Right.
And we tell Eric we want that, and we take it. Do you know we'll be charged with robbery violence? And if we are found guilty, if Janet says she saw us taking that mug from Eric,
violently,
and we were 2, that is defined as violence under our laws. Even though we didn't touch him.
We didn't, that's the question.
We were just 2 of us.
Yes.
The fact that you're 2 of you
versus one,
that constitutes violence under the penal code, 296.2. Number 1, number 2, and you'll go to Langata, I'll go to committee. We'll be found guilty because Janet and all these guys have seen what we've done.
Yeah.
The evidence is overwhelming.
Right.
We end up on death row. Number 2, you're walking alone. You find Janet with her phone, and you have a pen knife in your pocket, and you tell Janet, give me that knife, that phone. Janet does not resist. You don't use the knife on her. But the fact that you are armed with that knife, which is considered dangerous, or you had whatever is considered dangerous, even a stone in some instances, you'll be guilty of robbery violence. You're alone, you didn't harm Janet, you took her phone, but you had something that threatened her.
Right.
Then the third instance is now when you use actual violence against Janet. Either you are alone, or we are alone, or you use against Eric, or wherever it is. So you'll find a case that we are handling at Upper Hill, where guys were in a club, and they fought over a lady. And then this guy, after, he got injured, but when he went to the police station, he said, I was robbed of 20,000. It moves from the fight,
assault to
robbery violence. So when you go to death row today, when you go to people whose sentences have been commuted, many fall under that bracket. Come back to terrorism. You go and bomb people in Wajir like they do every time, and those areas, those crazy areas. The maximum sentence for terrorism is not the death penalty in Kenya. The maximum terrorism for genocide is under the Rome Statute, which is not death as well. So the numbers, the disproportionality of the death penalty and how it's applied in Kenya also concerns me. This is a passionate and emotional topic. So it's not just about let's abolish it, but let's look at what drives us there. Okay. Let's look at the biggest victims. For example, right now, the charges under which people can be taken to death row, robbery, violence, treason, majority of the charges are actually under the Military Act. Right? But for penal code, it's robbery with violence and and treason. And murder. Murder is still there,
yes.
But very few murder cases are ending up on death row.
on death row.
I think a couple of questions that emerge here in this whole conversation is Pete advocating for the total abolishment of the death penalty? Is he going after capital punishment? Does it mean that you're also against life in prison? and so on. Let's answer those questions after this break, right?
Cool.
Pete Ouko is our guest this morning. He's a very, very, very big advocate for against the death penalty, and he says there are very many people, like just like he's given us the statistics here, very many people who are behind bars today who have been committed on death row are actually people who committed what may be considered mugging. And there are many who are there just because the system just did not work for them, and you end up there. So the death penalty has been commuted for very many years. People who are on death row have not actually ended up being hanged. But so what's the point of having it? That's a discussion that we're having this morning at 24 minutes to 9. Let's take a break. We'll be back, fixing the nation one conversation at a time. And we're back. Our conversation continues with Peter Ouko on the death penalty and whether we should continue having the death penalty anywhere in our laws. Now, anyway, that we haven't. When's the last time someone was hanged in this country? 1984?
The record is 1987.
1987.
Yep.
Since then, people are on death row. They are in prison. They are just going through torture on a daily basis. Like you told us, your own experience, you are locked in a room for 23 and a half hours.
Yep.
Out of 24 days. That is just torture throughout. Why should we have it? However, Pete, what's the difference between the death penalty and life imprisonment? And which one are you saying? Are you saying that we should remove both?
No.
Capital punishment for capital offenses?
What I stand against is the death penalty because, number one, of the number of wrongful convictions. If I tell you about Kiarie, who was a young boy arrested in Kiumweri in Murang'a, brought to prison. He was underage when he was arrested. He was not even supposed to be in an adult prison. Charged with 8 other people. Kiarie was charged. The 7 other people say this boy was just arrested for nothing, for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Kiarie was convicted as guilty, though even the people he was arrested with said he was not guilty.
He was not part of us.
Because you see, the thing is, decisions made by the courts are not about sentimentality. It's about the evidence the judge feels warrants that decision. Whether right or not, that's a matter for debate. But then when Kiarie ended up on appeal, and then his appeal was dismissed, whereas all of us wanted this boy to go home. He was a young boy who, his life was just before him. His appeal was dismissed, and he was told, you're guilty still. That was at the Court of Appeal. Kiarie went down to the Supreme Court buildings, down here, took his belt and hanged himself in those court cells. That's the first death I know of recorded. People don't want to talk about it, but I have to talk about Kiarie because that haunts me every day. Wow. I wrote for people the appeals. I know Kiarie was totally innocent. From Kiumweri in Murang'a, this guy died in the cells at the Supreme Court building by suicide. That was an indictment against the injustice.
So the issue then, Pete,
so the issue is not about abolishment.
It's not about the sentence.
No.
It's about the process.
It's about the process, number one.
Because if Kiarie had been imprisoned even for 10 years,
Exactly.
it would have been unjust.
Yeah.
If he had been in prison for life, it would have been unjust.
True.
Right? So it's not about the death penalty. Then.
No.
But
As
he
I-
would
the
have- he
process
would
of
have his
getting there.
life. He
You
would
see,
have his life.
I'll come to your question because you asked about death and life. I'll come to that. But I was giving the example of Kiarie, who went through an injustice, mainly because, number one, he was charged with murder, so he had a lawyer. But some of the pro bono lawyers that people are given on death row, what kind of experience do they have to handle those kind of masters? Do they have, do they have it? Handling a a capital crime is not like just handling any everyday issue. But you'll find many times that people take the pro bono cases for death row inmates are literally very young lawyers, so they're learning through the ropes. So nowadays what happens is many inmates want to do their cases themselves. And that's why we're training paralegals in prison, people are taking their law degrees in prison, and there's a very robust justice system, justice training system going on in our prisons. That's what we do at Crime Support. But life imprisonment is now kind of defined in Kenya. The courts have also pronounced. The High Court, I remember Justice Ngugi Odunga, and I can't remember the other matter. They've already pronounced that life imprisonment should not be indefinite. You're supposed to learn from your mistakes. And if you learn from your mistakes, then if you have time to change, then change. Don't forget, the judge can also say, I can sentence you to 100 years. That's a discretion. But from my experience, I'll tell you, you sentence someone to death, they know that if you hang me tomorrow, it's done. So it's less painful.
Yeah.
You keep me in prison for 50 years,
It's torture.
that's torture. That's when I'll really feel it like, it hit me. Right now, if you find guys who left death row, who had been there for 25, 30 years in Kenya, they're some of the most reformed and most productive Kenyans right now. They don't show themselves off, but if you see what they're doing, because they learn from their mistakes. Some of them will tell you, I went to rob, especially when I went to prison in 98. That's the time when we had the bank robbers in the 90s. The real deal, if I may say that. The real, yeah. And one thing they tell you is, we use our guns not to kill people, but to scare people so that we take our money and go away. They were not thinking about harming. And most of them would be arrested, most of them would be taken to court, and that's how they ended up there. They, on appeal somehow, they got out. Very few of them ended up on death row. That's why you see the last person hanged was the coup people. Nobody has ever been hanged after that. And then President Kibaki commuted sentences twice. President Uhuru commuted sentences. President Ruto has done the same. And you find that majority of those who are there, what they fear the most are very long prison sentences. So it's more of a deterrence to send someone to prison for 50 years. You know, if you're 30 and you're sentenced for 50, you'll come out at 80. Where will you start, you know?
Yeah. So for the people, because I think to his point, there's a lot of people who always say a life for a life, right? And I'm guessing that's some of the work that you push against, let's say even for the death penalty conference that you're attending, is that generally there's a sense of death penalty is deserving for somebody who committed such a violent crime. You're saying, no, rehabilitation is what can, in a sense, begin to shift people into not committing a crime. Is that what you find yourself fighting all the time, of people saying, no, we need the death penalty. What these people did was horrible. You're saying, nope, life in prison because... Yeah.
So that's why I talk about the concept being very emotive, very emotional as well, and very controversial at times, especially in Kenya. Look at Rwanda, which had its genocide in '94. Where is it now? They abolished the death penalty. The Zambian president, Hichilema HH, when he was appointed, we were with the team in Berlin for the World Congress, they gave a 3-month window. They said by December, that was in October, we'll have abolished. But they didn't abolish it per se. What they did was to change the laws, the sentences provided for in the law, which was the same Opio and I process here, so that the maximum sentence is not death. Don't forget the Constitution provides for sanctity of life unless it can be taken by a written law. So if there's no written law that takes it away, then it will stay there, but there's no written law.
Yeah.
Some people would argue, now that no one has carried out the death penalty in Kenya since 1987, then why? You know, it seems to be an issue, quote unquote. If we're not carrying it out, why then the push?
Yeah, and that's the question, because someone would wake up tomorrow. You know, there's only one person who has the power to sign that warrant. It's the president.
Yeah.
So if the president signs up tomorrow, I mean, you saw on June 25th, when the president made his speech in the evening, and he was really, he was really angry. And he said, these are treasoners act.
Right.
What if that next morning or that night, he signed a warrant and said, whoever is on death row, because these guys have now pushed me, have to be hanged. You know, it has to be done before morning. So if he signs that warrant, tomorrow morning you wake up and find all the 155 people who are on death row, whether they were, you know, because they don't have a process to go through why you wrongfully convicted, not all of them, then you have to go. The second people most at risk, I can say this without a fear of contradiction, are politicians, because they're the ones who are always fighting each other. So if you want to overthrow the president, and you get charged with treason, and you end up on death row, and he signs that warrant, you're done. You're gone. But what Janet was also asking, and what you've asked, by the way, we have a very big youthful population in Kenya. How many of them actually know about the death penalty? I can tell you people 45 years and above and below, because the last execution was 38 years ago. So when you're 7 years old, did you really know that?
No.
You didn't. So people 45, majority of Kenyans actually have never experienced anybody being hanged by our laws. So whatever decision they talk about, whatever they talk about would just be about, their thoughts. When you see Kenyans going out to the street to kill, like taking a life of a street robber, a mugger, it's more out of frustration about the justice system not doing its bit. So what we are doing in our awareness creation, and because we don't whine, as part of what we do is to create awareness and also offer solutions. Young people need to know the law. Kenyans need to know the law, so that you know that if, like just what the class we went through right now, when we teach them that, we're finding crime figures going down in the areas where we've taught them. We work with the DPP, we work with the AG, we work with the police, we work with the DCI to disseminate this information so that the preventative side is more, it's even cheaper for the government in the long run.
It is.
If people know that if I commit this crime, if I do this, it could actually lead me to this. The second issue about the life imprisonment that we are talking about, the courts, other than the courts having pronounced themselves on that, the life imprisonment in Kenya initially had no limits. So it was, Eric, as you asked, you'd be told you've been sentenced to life and you'd stay there for 40 years, 50 years, or till you die. Basically, it meant stay there till you die.
The rest of your life.
There was a guy who was convicted during President Kenyatta 1. We used to call him Kibaki in prison. And then he was mentally challenged, and this guy ended up in Mathare. He stayed through the tenure of Kibaki 1. Kenyatta 1, Kibaki 1.
Moi.
He got Moi, Kibaki 1, Kibaki 2. He got released by Kibaki 2, by Kenyatta 2. It's UK who got him released. This guy had been in prison and at the Mathare mental health facility. That's another sad aspect of it. The psychological aspect, the mental wellness in Kenya that leads people to crime is on an astounding level. Be it femicide, be it murder, be it robbery, there's a mental psycho wellness side to crime in Kenya right now, which is not being addressed.
Yep.
And we've decided also to champion wellness in the family, in the community, in schools, in whatever we do, because many people do not have the capacity to make a rational decision at the point they are committing that crime. Even the robbers.
Yeah.
Me, I just thought I would snatch a phone and then I ran away with it. Then how did I end up in prison? They're as clueless as they come when they're in prison. But if we can continue the conversation and let people know, okay, there's this danger that you could actually be locked in prison for life. There's this danger that whatever crime, not danger, we have to pay for the crimes we commit. I'm a champion of paying for crimes we commit, without any exception. Their MPs were right now in Parliament. We were with them in committee. I saw the kind of things they went through and the pain, the pain they went through, and the complaints they made as well when they were there. But I'm amazed that when they come to Parliament, they don't push for that. Yet they were at the verge of being actually sentenced to death. They came back, went back to Parliament, and they're just continuing as.
Yeah, maybe you've spoken to it, but what changes are essential in the legal system to prevent wrongful convictions?
Wrongful conviction, I believe if everyone did their part right, it starts, as Eric said, it's a process. Do the police arrest people? Do they get the right evidence at the right time? And then now the DPP has something called the decision to charge, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. So they get all the evidence, then they decide how they should charge you. There are cases that are ending up at ADR. I had a case in committee of a very wealthy guy from Kiambu who had a difference with his brother. And then the brother got them framed with his son, with his nephew now, this guy's son, and they ended up on death row in committee. Now, the crazy thing is, he was charged with stealing a packet of chips. A packet of chips. And that time, I remember it was worth 20 bob. So the question the judges asked themselves at appeal, this guy is a multimillionaire. He has plots and plots and plots, Why would he go rob his brother's son of a packet of chips? And then they saw it was just stage managed, but the guy had already ended up in prison. He got released on appeal, I think, after 2 weeks on death row. So those are the kind of injustices. If we speak about them, and most times I'll tell you, the moment someone is convicted, sentenced to death, the family is ashamed, the guy is ashamed, they don't want to speak out. So they suffer injustice in silence. So those voices, we're amplifying the voices about the justice system being made to work and work well. Now, judges, I'll just come to the last bit. You're talking about the police doing the right part, the prosecution doing its part. What about the justice system? Are judges as clean as we think? Are they infallible? That's a question that everyone is asking. I can tell you for free, we have had cases. And not only judges, there's some legal practitioners also who've basically bastardized the system. So I think all Kenyans need to know that, integrity is for all of us. Let's do our work with integrity. It's not about settling scores. It's about making our country better. It's about fixing our nation.
That's a very well way of putting it. A couple of things that I pick up. Number one, I agree with you. Our mental health status in this country is leading people to do crazy things, and then they end up in a system. Are they in their rightful state of mind when they're doing the things that they're doing? That aside, the whole issue about our justice system and how unfair it can get and it gets for very many people, is a conversation that ought to continue happening, even as we push for just removing this piece of legislation, coming up with a piece of legislation that removes the word death penalty from our laws,
Yeah.
so that then there's no judge that has death penalty as an option, and therefore there's no prison that will have a death row inmate. That I support, which I'll come back to the other question, but let me first ask this one. There was an attempt by Opiyo Wandayi when he was in Parliament, and he was a leader of majority, in 2023, published and presented a bill to Parliament on the abolition of the death penalty.
Yeah.
Now he's a minister.
Yeah.
What's the fate of that bill, to the best of your knowledge?
Now, the bill, when Hon Opiyo Wandayi presented it, it was a private member's bill. It was being processed, and normally private members' bills are not prioritized in Parliament. You've got to know how to get to the House Business Committee to push it to be, prioritized. And then Opiyo got appointed to the government, of course. And normally, when bills go through a session, some of them lapse, so they have to be introduced again. But I believe that whatever Opiyo Wandayi believed in he still believes in the same thing. So I'd just like to challenge Opiyo Wandayi. I mean, I know he watches Fix the Nation. Why can't he also bring that matter to the cabinet? Why can't he talk to the president about the need for us to abolish the death penalty? I believe even the president believes in abolition. It's only that he hasn't talked much about it, or he hasn't gotten the right facts about it. So I'd like to call the AG. I'd like to talk to everyone. It's not a conversation I want to be driven down anyone's throat by Latif and Janet and Bishar and Pete. No. Let's just look at why do we have it in the first place. If we say that it's a deterrence, has it really deterred crime from being committed? Has it stopped the Mathare killings that I've been dealing with every day, that people are being knifed every day? Those boys who are doing those gang things don't know the consequences. We are seeing right now the Minister for Interior talking about gangs being proliferating everywhere, led by politicians. That's a fact. They are causing mayhem. Are they being sentenced to death? No, because they have protection. The interference in the judicial system means that some people who are committing egregious crimes will not end up on death row, will not end up being punished. And that's where the anger comes in. When Kenyans are asking, okay, when this guy did this offense, we saw it. Why didn't it happen? That's when they start committing mob injustice. They don't need to do that. We are teaching them not to do that.
Okay.
No one needs to take anyone's life. Let people be processed. And the people processing, let them do their work. Because the weakest link we have in the fight against crime are the justice players.
It's the individuals.
The individuals. So I don't know what's wrong with us Kenyans. I think we just need a reset, a total reset for all of us. No, we need to fix our minds first.
People.
We need to fix. You didn't answer. You asked him about
I wanted to ask.
graduation also.
I wanted
Oh,
to
yeah.
ask.
Oh, yeah.
Then get back
Graduation,
to-
yes.
I wanted to ask that question of the journey because, like you're saying, the system
Yeah.
on paper is written and designed to work
Yeah.
seamlessly.
Yeah.
There's a crime committed, there's a reporting system where you report whether to the chief, to the local police station, and how all that is processed, how it goes to the ODPP, how it goes to court, and how the evidence is presented in court, how both sides argue the case,
Yeah.
and how a judge or a magistrate is then allowed to independently make a decision.
Yeah.
But there's a chink in the system, and that's the individuals. How do we fix it? Are you a member of the court users committee, any of the court users committees, which then come into the National Council for the Administration of Justice, which brings together all these people, and have these discussions being held?
I'll tell you for free. Crime Sipo is a member of a couple of court users committees. These discussions are held. Kenyans, we talk. It's the time to move from the rhetoric to the action. We just have to do it. Eric, I'll tell you, we have good laws, we have good people, and let's not stop the people who want to do good. In many instances, because when the system works, the people who will gain most from a broken system will fight it. So we need a resolute team, and I think it starts from the top. We need to have a system where when leadership, look at Michuki. I keep talking about Michuki, the late John Michuki. Why? Michuki was just a minister, if I may use the word just. But when he said we have to wear uniform as Matatu conductors, and we had to do that. He said you have to put seatbelts. The whole country did that because the laws, he was just aligning himself with the laws. Kenyans need to know that, if I break the law, if your son, we've seen in other countries, if a president's son or daughter commits a crime, they are arrested, they're taken to court, and the president goes there as a parent, not as a president.
Not as president.
Yeah. In Kenya, there are so many calls being given to the police. Release this guy. This guy's committed a bad crime, but you're saying release him. Yeah. Who is feeding our kids with drugs, ecstasy, and all the drugs that are being fed in this city? And what are we doing about it? So I think it starts from every Kenyan saying, we want to do a bit, but also the people, the duty bearers, being given the leeway. Our constitution gave a lot of independence to the legal, the ODPP and the police to do their work without interference. I just pray that politicians would stop interfering sometimes, not all times, but sometimes, with the legal system.
Right.
I'll give you an example, just a first one. During the last elections, a 6-year-old girl was raped in Mathare. The person who raped this girl, I have his photo here, was a politician's bodyguard. This guy has been playing the justice system. People in Mathare have looked for him. He's being protected. He's being senior. He's never been charged. This girl now is 13 years old. She's living with this trauma. But this guy is walking free somewhere in this country.
Just because
the record is at Muthaiga police station. You see, so that kind of interference is what I think the president needs to put a stop to and say, IG, do your work. DCI, do your work. Politicians, sorry, I'll not take your calls. I'm not saying he takes calls. But don't use my name that, I'm the president's friend, I'm the vice president's friend, I'm whoever's friend, I'm Eric's friend. Could you release this guy? If you commit a traffic offense, don't bribe that cop. Go to court and pay your fine. It's a misdemeanor.
Kubali.
Why do we always look for shortcuts as Kenyans? And then when someone else does the same, you're like pointing fingers. We are so good at that. So just to answer your question, we have very good laws. We are very good Kenyans, very good intentioned, but we are not walking the talk. So I think we need to walk the talk.
Mariam asked the graduation question.
No.
You had it.
I heard it. No, I had it. Yes, tell us about your graduation. But first of all, post-incarceration. Tell me about adjusting to life post-incarceration and then all the way to graduation.
Oh, yeah, post-incarceration. Basically, as I told you, I went to prison knowing I was not guilty. So I never slept any day thinking that I'd be hanged. So every morning I'd wake up at 5 in prison, take a shower, and say I'm going home. That was my faith. For 18 years, every day I was going home, and it became a joke. Like, Pete, you're always saying you're going home. How come you're writing appeals for people, they're going home, you're doing this, and people are going home, and you're stuck here? But I just knew my time would come. So basically, my mind never slept in prison one day. No. I always got myself engaged thinking about, when I come home, what do I do? When we started Crime Sipua, it was on death row in 2007. And the officer in charge asked me, why are you starting an organization when on death row you don't know about tomorrow? I said, just because we have to do it. The youth need to know that crime does not pay. So we need to talk to them. It does not matter where your voice comes from, just get your voice amplified. I didn't know I would fix the nation today. But I've gotten the platform to amplify it. So let's amplify our voices. The number two, when the post, you're talking about the post, I had my kids. I didn't see them for 8 years. Who helped me get my kids? A prison officer. Went, looked for them. Their names had been changed and everything, and he came and told me, Peter, I think I've got your kids somewhere.
Wow.
So I got my kids after 8 years. They came, did very well, went to uni. So I came home. In fact, the letter I wrote to the President Uhuru was like, I missed my kids' class 8 graduation. I missed their Form 4 graduation. If I miss the university graduation, I don't feel I'm a real dad, So I wrote that letter to him. It reached to him, and yeah, the rest is history. So the friends we had with my late wife, Jenny, were the same. So they knew my story. They knew me. They kept visiting. I was never lonely in prison. I think I was the most visited prisoner for the 18 years. And I also made new friends, lots of new friends. So pre-release, I was ready to come home. Post-release, the day I came home, someone called me, and he didn't know I was, he just called me and said, Pete, we hear you're home. Where are you? Then I told him I'm somewhere. Then he said, okay, come meet me. Then he said, this is your office. The same day I came home, I was given an office to work from. The same day I came home, someone called me, a friend of Eric's, I won't mention his name here, and I remember he came home on 26th of October. And on 27th, he called me in the morning and told me, Pete, you're no longer in prison, you're home. You're going to mentor the youth. There was a youth camp somewhere in Kasarani. So the next day, I was literally working without pay.
You were busy.
I was busy. So the key thing, and that's how we're preparing now. For Crime Sipua, as we prepare you for release, we start working with you 3 months before release and post-release, so that you are mentally prepared to come and join the society. And not everyone would, have that kind of reception that I had, but I can tell you, because of the changes that have happened, death row inmates are going to school. That's how I ended up studying. I'll let you know that. And death row inmates are also doing activities that keep them busy and learning skills.
Right.
Yeah. So I did my law degree through the University of London, and the graduation was for my diploma in 2015. That was the first graduation in prison.
That's
Wow.
fantastic.
Good.
18 years.
Good inspiration story. And also just seeing what you're doing and what you're pushing for. Asante sana. Thank you very much for joining us today, Pix.
Thank you. Thank
And
you
for
for
all the
having
work
me.
that you're doing.
Thank you.
And for raising this awareness, and for saying let's fix the issue of death row and the death penalty and the injustice system that we have in the name of justice system.